There's a moment in every person's life when they realize that the people who are supposed to love them the most can also hurt them the deepest. For me, that moment didn't happen in a dark alley or in the office of a stranger. It happened in my mother's living room in Garland, Texas, on a Sunday afternoon in October 2019, surrounded by the smell of cornbread and sweet tea, with the sound of a football game humming in the background. I remember standing there, holding a paper plate with food I hadn't even touched yet, looking at the faces of every person in my family, cousins, aunts, my mother, all of them frozen, all of them staring at me after my sister had just said the words that cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt. She said I was a burden. She said it loud. She said it like it was a fact that everyone already knew but was too polite to say out loud. And the worst part, for one single terrible second, I believed her. This is the story of that day, and everything that came before it, and everything that came after it. This is the story of how I fell completely apart, and how I quietly, stubbornly, painfully put myself back together, without anyone knowing, without anyone clapping for me, without a single person in that room understanding what I had already become. My name is Daniel, and I need you to hear this. It started in January 2019, which feels like both yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. I had been living in a decent apartment off Greenville Avenue in East Dallas. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. A one-bedroom on the second floor with a balcony that faced a parking lot. But I didn't care because it was mine. I was 31 years old, working as a logistics coordinator for a distribution company out near the I-30 corridor, making decent enough money to stay afloat, save a little, and feel like I was moving forward. Not fast, not dramatically, but forward. That's all I'd ever asked for. Then February hit, and the world seemed to decide that forward wasn't a direction I was allowed to move in anymore. It started with the diagnosis. Nothing life-threatening, I want to be honest about that, but a serious autoimmune condition that the doctors at Medical City Dallas identified after 3 weeks of me thinking I just had a bad flu that wouldn't let go. The fatigue was crushing. There were mornings I couldn't lift my arms above my head. There were days I sat in my car in the parking garage at work and genuinely didn't know if I could make it up the elevator. I missed shifts. I missed deadlines. I tried to explain what was happening to my supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda who wasn't unkind but had a department to run and quotas to hit. By March, I was let go. They called it a workforce restructuring, which is the corporate way of saying your body stopped cooperating with our schedule, so you're done. I drove home on I-635 that afternoon in absolute silence, the Dallas skyline fading behind me in the rearview mirror, and I sat in that parking lot view apartment and stared at the ceiling for probably 2 hours without moving. I had about 4 months of savings. I told myself that was enough time to get back on my feet. I filed for unemployment. I applied to every logistics and supply chain position I could find on Indeed and LinkedIn. I went to 2 interviews in April, one in Irving, one near the Design District, and neither called back. By May, I was behind on rent. My landlord, Mr. Okonkwo, was a decent man who gave me an extra 2 weeks without me even having to ask, but I knew I couldn't stay. The math simply didn't work anymore. And there's a particular kind of shame that lives in the space between what you planned for your life and where your life actually is. I packed what I could into 2 duffel bags and a trunk, put the rest in a storage unit on Buckner Boulevard, and called my mother. She said come home without hesitation. She always does. My mother's house is in Garland, a suburb northeast of Dallas proper, one of those quiet neighborhoods off Brand Road with sidewalks and oak trees and neighbors who still wave from driveways. It's the house I grew up in. My old bedroom had been turned into a sewing room, but my mother cleared it out in a single afternoon and put fresh sheets on the bed and didn't say a word about the circumstances. She just made dinner and asked me if I was hungry. That's my mother. That's who she is. My sister Renee was a different story entirely. Renee is 4 years older than me. She lives in Frisco, in one of those master-planned communities north of Dallas, where the HOA sends letters if your grass grows a quarter-inch too long, and every house looks like a slightly different version of the same house. She married her college boyfriend, David, who works in commercial real estate and drives a silver Audi and coaches their son's Little League team on Saturdays. I want to be fair to her. I want to say that Renee has worked hard and that she earned what she has. Both of those things are true, but there is a version of success that makes some people generous, and there is a version that makes them defensive, as if your struggle is somehow a reflection of their choices, as if your falling down is an accusation aimed directly at them. Renee was the second kind. It started with small things. When I moved back to my mother's house in Garland, Renee started calling more frequently, not to check on me, but to check on our mother. There was always a careful clinical concern in her voice when she'd ask Mom if things were okay with the house, if Mom needed anything, as if my presence had transformed our childhood home into some kind of problem to be managed. She'd say things in that particular tone that some people have perfected, that tone that sounds almost caring but lands like a stone. Things like, "Mom, you know you don't have to take care of him, right? He's a grown man." I heard that one through the wall of my bedroom on a Thursday night in June, while I was lying on the bed staring at a water stain on the ceiling and trying to calculate how many more weeks my storage unit rental would last. I started waking up at 6 every morning, not because I had anywhere to be, but because I refused to become the thing Renee's voice was turning me into in my own mind. I made coffee in my mother's kitchen. I made her breakfast before she left for her shift at the school district office where she worked as an administrative coordinator. I cleaned the house. I fixed the gutter on the east side of the roof that had been pulling away from the fascia board since the spring storms. I mowed the lawn every week. In July, I started doing something I hadn't planned. There's a stretch of Preston Road in North Dallas where a lot of small businesses operate. HVAC companies, plumbing outfits, small construction operations, and I'd noticed that many of them had terrible online operations. No real website, no Google presence, outdated Facebook pages. I'd done some basic digital marketing in a previous job, years before the logistics work, and I started cold calling them, not asking for money, just offering to help. The first one who said yes was a small HVAC company owned by a man named Ray Dempsey who worked out of a shop near Farmers Branch. I built him a basic website using a free platform. I cleaned up his Google business listing. Within 3 weeks, he told me his phone was ringing more than it ever had. He handed me $200 in cash. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not anyone. I kept it quiet the way you keep something precious quiet, because the moment you tell people about a fragile thing, they either trample it or take it from you. By August, I had 4 clients. Small businesses scattered around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a landscaping company in Mesquite, a family-owned restaurant on Beltline Road in Addison, a mobile detailing operation out of Garland, and Ray's HVAC company. None of them were paying me enormous amounts. Together they were paying me just under $2,000 a month, which wasn't enough to move back out, but it was enough to feel like the ground under my feet was no longer made entirely of sand. I was working from my childhood bedroom on a refurbished laptop I'd bought for $60 from a guy selling electronics out of the back of a pickup at a flea market off I-20. I ran everything through that machine. I taught myself things on YouTube. I practiced things I didn't know at 2 in the morning when the house was quiet, and the only sound was the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. Renee came to visit once in August. She walked through the house with that particular way she has of walking through spaces. Like she's conducting an inspection she's trying to make look casual. She stood in the doorway of my bedroom while I was working and looked at my setup, the second-hand laptop, the yellow legal pad covered in notes, the half-empty coffee cup, and something moved across her face that I can only describe as confirmation. Like she saw exactly what she expected to see. "Still figuring things out?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Something like that." She nodded, slowly. The way someone nods when they've decided something about you and your answer just confirmed it. What she didn't see, what she couldn't see from that doorway, was the spreadsheet open behind my browser window, the one with the client names and invoices and the projection model I'd been building. She couldn't see the email thread with a restaurant group based in Uptown Dallas that had reached out to me after the Addison restaurant owner mentioned my name to his cousin. She couldn't see the proposal I'd drafted, 3 pages long, professional and precise, sitting in my drafts folder ready to send. She just saw her little brother sitting in his old bedroom in their mother's house, looking like someone who'd been left behind. September came, and the restaurant group in Uptown signed a 3-month contract worth $6,500. I remember the moment the signed contract came through to my email. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a Whataburger on Garland Road, and I read that email 4 times. Then I sat there for 10 minutes without moving, not from shock, from something that felt like recognition, like my body was slowly remembering who it was supposed to be. I opened a business checking account at a Chase branch on Main Street in downtown Garland the next afternoon. I registered an LLC with the state of Texas, Daniel Carter Consulting, which is not a glamorous name, but it is a real one. I still didn't tell anyone. October in Dallas is when the heat finally breaks. The air gets clean and the sky turns that particular shade of blue that makes you remember why people love Texas in the fall, and the neighborhoods around Garland fill up on Sundays with the smell of someone grilling something somewhere nearby. My mother decided to have the family over for Sunday dinner the first weekend of October. She made her pot roast and her cornbread and her green beans cooked with fatback the way she learned from her own mother, and cousins came, and my Aunt Patricia came, and David and Renee drove down from Frisco with the kids. The living room filled up the way it always does, loud and warm and layered, the Cowboys game on television, children running through the hallway, the smell of food moving through the whole house. I was helping my mother carry dishes from the kitchen to the dining room table when Renee started talking. She was in the living room with David and my cousin Marcus, and I wasn't part of the conversation. I was just nearby, close enough to hear everything. She was talking about a friend of hers who was going through a hard time financially, and her voice had that tone again, that particular combination of sympathy and distance that people use when they're talking about someone they've decided to feel sorry for rather than respect. And then, somehow, and I still don't fully understand the progression, somehow the conversation turned to me. I heard Marcus say something about how things were going for me, whether I was working. I heard Renee's voice shift into something sharper. "He's fine," she said. "I mean, he's getting by. Mom helps him out." "Is he working?" Marcus asked. There was a pause I felt in my chest. "Not really," Renee said. "Look, Daniel has always needed someone to catch him. That's just who he is. Honestly, he's been a burden on this family for as long as I can remember. Mom won't say it, but we all know it." The room went quiet. Not immediately. It happened in a wave, the way sound recedes. My Aunt Patricia stopped talking. My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway. The cousin nearest to me, a teenager named Jasmine who I've always liked, looked at the floor, and I was standing there in the hallway between the kitchen and the dining room, holding a bowl of green beans, completely still, with every eye in that room slowly finding its way to me. The word she'd used, burden, landed somewhere below language, below thought. It landed in the part of you that a word can reach when it comes from someone who was supposed to be in your corner. I set the bowl down on the dining room table, very carefully, and I walked out the front door. I sat on the front porch steps for a while. The neighborhood was doing what October neighborhoods do. A family walking a dog down the sidewalk. The distant percussion of someone's music from a car passing 2 streets over. The smell of leaves and someone's backyard grill. The sky was the color of a bruise at the horizon and completely clear above. My phone was in my pocket. It buzzed twice while I was sitting there. I didn't look at it. My mother came out after about 10 minutes. She sat down beside me on the steps without saying anything, and we just sat together for a moment the way only people who've known each other for 31 years can sit together. "You okay?" she finally asked. "I will be," I said. She put her hand on mine for a moment. Then she went back inside. What happened next I did not plan. I want to be clear about that. I hadn't been saving anything for a dramatic moment. I hadn't been preparing a speech. I'd been keeping my work private because that was the only way I knew how to protect it while it was still becoming something, not to expose it to doubt before it was strong enough to survive the exposure. But I went back inside. The room was still unsettled the way rooms stay unsettled after something uncomfortable has been said. Renee was at the dining table picking at food, her face slightly closed, doing the thing people do when they've said something they know went too far, but aren't ready to walk back. David was watching the game too carefully. Marcus was refilling his plate. I stood in the room for a moment. Then I pulled out my phone. "Can I show you all something?" I said. Nobody answered, which I took as permission. I opened my business banking app and I turned the screen toward the room. I'm not someone who talks about money. I was raised to believe that's private. But sometimes the only language that reaches through the noise is the one that people were using against you. The account showed over $18,000. Because the restaurant group had made their first payment, and because Ray had referred 2 new clients who both came on in September, and because the month of October had been the best month I'd had since I started, I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't make a speech. I just said, "I started a consulting business 6 months ago. I have 9 clients. I've been paying Mom $300 a month since July. She didn't tell anyone because I asked her not to. And I have a meeting next week with a marketing firm in Uptown that wants to discuss a partnership." Then I looked at Renee. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Her face, and I've replayed this in my memory more times than I can count, went through about 4 things in the space of 5 seconds. There was confusion, and then a recalculation, and then something I can only describe as the look of someone realizing that the story they've been telling themselves has been wrong. Her eyes went to the phone, then to my face, then to my mother, who was standing in the kitchen doorway holding a dish towel, watching with an expression that I recognized, because it was the expression she wore when she already knew the ending. The room was completely silent. Renee opened her mouth once and didn't say anything. Then she looked down at her plate. I drove home from my mother's house that night down I-30. The lights of Dallas scattered wide across the flat Texas dark, and I thought about the strange math of the last 10 months, how you can be living a whole life that no one around you can see, how the work you do in silence doesn't make noise, not until it does. Renee called me 11 days later. It was a Tuesday morning, early, and I was at my desk when the phone rang. She didn't apologize the way people apologize in movies. There was no single clean moment of tears and confession. It was halting and imperfect, the way real apologies are. She said she'd been thinking. She said she didn't realize. She said some other things that I'm keeping between us, because not everything belongs to the audience, and some things need to stay private to mean something. I told her I appreciated the call, and I did. Genuinely. Here's what I know now, in the long, quiet aftermath of that October Sunday in Garland, Texas. The people who call you a burden have usually already decided that you need them. What they can't tolerate, what truly unsettles them at a level they may not fully understand, is the possibility that you might not, that you might be working, that you might be building something, that you might be, right now, in this very moment that they've written you off, becoming exactly who you were always supposed to be. I moved out of my mother's house in January of 2020, exactly 1 year after the diagnosis, exactly 1 year after Brenda handed me the termination paperwork in that beige office off I-30. I leased a small office space in a converted building in the Bishop Arts District in West Dallas. Exposed brick, big windows, the sound of the neighborhood coming up from the street. I put a desk by the window. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. I thought about that second-hand machine from the flea market off I-20. I thought about the $200 cash payment from Ray Dempsey in his shop near Farmers Branch. I thought about the legal pad covered in notes. I thought about sitting in the Whataburger parking lot on Garland Road, reading a signed contract for the 4th time. The smallest version of your success is always the most important one, not because of what it's worth, but because of when it arrives. Because it arrives in the dark. Because nobody planned a party for it. Because the only person who knows about it is you, alone in your childhood bedroom at 2 in the morning, with a ceiling fan turning slowly above you and an entire silent city outside the window, not watching, not waiting, just existing while you quietly, stubbornly, impossibly become someone they never accounted for. My name is Daniel Carter. I was never a burden. I was just building in a room where nobody thought to look, and that made all the difference. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if any part of it felt familiar, leave a comment below. You are not alone. And whatever room you're building in right now, keep going.